Welcome to Wellthy Living Conversations, episode 42. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living. It is here that I connect with a variety of wonderful humans to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. So social connection and cohesion is critical and when it comes to good health, longevity and quality of life. Yet during the last few months, we've been living in unusual times of isolation and of social distancing, So I'm wondering, what is the impact of this and how do we prepare for and transition into a new story in the COVID-19 era? What does it mean for individuals, for communities, and as a society? And what role can we play? So on this episode, I chat with Gilbert Rochecouste, an inspiring man for over 25 years who has led the movement enhancing social cohesion by reconnecting or connecting and reconnecting people to places. So Gilbert is recognised locally and internationally as a leading voice in placemaking and the creation of vibrant, resilient and loved places. He's a sought-after speaker and skilled facilitator for community and stakeholder engagement activities and has worked with over 1,000 cities, towns, main streets and communities. Gilbert, it is such a pleasure to welcome you on the show today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lisa. Great to be here and fantastic.
Yeah, and I don't think I said your name right. Did I say your last name right?
Look, you pretty much nailed it. I've worked with 1,000 different cities and I've had 1,000 different versions of my name. So it's all good. I get from Gilbert to Gilles to Gil to Gilbert to Gilbert.
And your last name?
And you know what? I'm good with that. It's like, it's all good.
Oh, good. So what I was thinking, and, I love what you do. And, we've had a discussion on the podcast before I think last year sometime about your work and what you do and placemaking and some of the things you do. But times have changed and, we're all experiencing things differently. And this whole idea of connecting people to places looks very different at the moment. Like we're in very unusual times whereby there's lots of, as I said, social distancing and isolation, and so creating spaces to become more connective, it looks quite different. And I would love to talk a little bit about that with you today and about what the story is going forward. But before we go and talk about the story going forward, I'd love for you to share some of your biggest observations and reflections over the last couple of months, because I know that this time has given myself and I know a lot of other people time to really think about our own lives and what impact our choices are having on us as humans and also on the planet. And we've been able to see, some incredible things that have happened to our planet in the fact that as humans we've isolated. But I'm wondering what your reflections are coming from someone who works in this space.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, well, look, if you would have asked me 4 months ago when we're just quietly working away and starting the year, and obviously we started the year with a bang with the bushfires, and then to say that we were going to be in lockdown for 4 months with coronavirus, and then and out of that comes Black Lives Matter, and then the economic sort of tsunami that and climate change tsunami that envelops that. Who would have known 2020 would be what I call our defining moment of our times? Mm. My mum's 94 years old, and her defining moment was the Second World War. But this is definitely our defining moment, and a lot of reflections have come out of that. And dare I say, we're still in the middle of it. I don't think we might even be in the start of it. So this could be a whole 5 to 10 year transition process that we're about to birth a new story. But I've had some reflections, definitely, even from my clients and the people in the area that I work in, which is city making and placemaking, is that one thing that won't go back to normal is our work life. We've had for the last couple of 100 years, we've had that Protestant work ethic, 9 to 5, and work hard and work, especially post 1945, we had this suburban, jump in the car, go to work, be in traffic for 3 hours a day, and the stress of that has just gone to the max. And suddenly we've been at home and reconnecting to something way deeper and bigger in our lives, which is of course the work-life balance. Most people have got these hours back in their lives, and which has been quite extraordinary. And I've got one client who's got another client who's got 15,000 employees. 85% of the people who work there have said they won't want to come back to work like they did in the past. Pretty much is saying they'd rather work from home 2 or 3 days a week, which is quite an extraordinary revolution. It's not evolution, it's revolution. And I think that work-life balance is my biggest reflection. Even myself and my team, even if it's a small team, will be rethinking that. So what does that actually mean for us? What does that mean for where we live and how we spend our time and spend our money in it? So I think that other reflection I've had is that obviously if we spend our times more locally, that we get to know our local places and our local bioregion and main streets and shopkeepers and what's happening in our local spaces. We've had to almost be forced to understand our local spaces more intimately, going for walks in local parks and around the block and seeing things that we've never seen before. So I think definitely the working from home and work-life balance has been a key element. And I think the other key reflection I've had, Lisa, is that internal world. The whole world, not all the world, but a lot of the big chunk of the world's gone internal. But what I mean by that is we've had time to reflect and to pause. And I think what people have, is the old saying, it takes 23 or 25 days to change a habit. We've had up to 90 plus days to change habits. It's going to be very hard to go back to what we call the old normal. And the new normal is still being sort of evolving and unfolding. And I think that interior world is really about values. What's important to us. A lot of people have had I've had many therapist friends, and my partner's a therapist, and all the conversations about purpose and what's going on and how do I relate better to my family or mum or my partner or my ex or this or that, because we've had this sort of deep connection to our internal lives and we've been in intimate spaces with our loved ones and things are going to happen. So we've had to learn to relearn how to relate, especially on a deeper level, on a more conscious and authentic level. So dare I say, those three elements are real tipping points around societal changes, and they're still unfolding, and they're going to have massive impacts on our life, our work lives, our personal lives. And I think the other thing that's we've had to rethink is that in our consumer society, there's a lot of distractions around sport, entertainment, shopping. We've had to sort of cut off from those and had to go back to basic things like cooking, gardening, connecting, and having much more authentic relationships with our loved ones, games, crafts, all of those things. I've started pickling lemons and sauerkraut and vegetables.
Got to come to your house.
Come on, I love that.
Yeah.
I sort of. But so there you go. There's a lot of these elements. I think if you just took those, there's a dozen other things, but if you just took those three things.
Yeah. And, it's kind of like that feeling, when you say all that, for me, it's like we're resetting our core foundations.
I think it's a major reset. Maybe the world's having a major reset.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that, all those things that you just described about home cooking and crafts and gardening and all of those sort of basic homey sort of things that we do. I mean, that's the things where if you think about those things, you think of your grandparents. So in a way, we're moving forward, but in a way, we're kind of also reconnecting with the past generations and looking at some of the benefits of the way that they lived that we've moved away from, and we've had the opportunity to really come back and reconnect to that as well.
That's right. I think what old is new again.
Yeah.
In a 21st century context, and I think there'll be a whole new generation that's been looking for a larger purpose, and I'm talking about mostly the millennials who'll be taking over as our largest citizen group and consumer group in the next next few years will start to rethink some, for them, what's important is a sense of deep social connection, authenticity, a sense of community, a sense of buying things that will be built to last. And how do they live in a more conscious way? How do they shop more consciously? So in this period, I think we're going to see tens of thousands of new professions and jobs like we saw in the last 30, 40 years pre-internet happen. So it will be one that I think will move towards how do we make the world, how do we care for the world more in a more deeper way, but also how do we become more caring and more conscious human beings? And there lies part and parcel of this whole new story that's emerging as we let go of the old story.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels so big, and at the same time, a lot of the things that I think that we're looking at doing, and some of the things that you shared, is about going back to simple. So it's simplifying, yet it seems such a transition. And I know, and those things sort of seem like a little bit of a contradiction, because it's this massive transformation to move to something new, but yet it's also something that we're sort of going back to simple. But I suppose, like you said, in a modern world, or in the, in the 21st century, like, how do we do the simple, but yet in today's world of high connectivity, of online connection and all of those things, which is just so different.
That's right. I think, we are in that transition. Dare I say, Lisa, I think we're in a liminal space at the moment. We're in that in-between space. We're like a caterpillar that's yet to birth out of its cocoon. And we're sort of stretching and pulling back and saying, no, I don't want to. Some are saying, no, I don't want to change. I want to go back to the old normal. I just want to go and shop, and I want my footy. I want my entertainment. I want to go to the movies, blah, blah, blah. Give me my distractions back, and then there's a whole group of others who've said, actually, no, I'm not buying into this. I want to participate as a citizen in my community, in my democracy. And you can see that happening in the Black Lives Movement, around social justice, around the climate change justice, people coming onto the streets and saying no to our governments and our societal norms and values, and saying, no, we want a reset.
Yes.
We want a fair society. We want a clean, green environment to raise our children in. We want to leave a legacy for our children's children. Leave something for them. So I think the story that we're in at the moment doesn't really allow for that to blossom and bloom, So in that, and you touched on it before, I think in that search for elegant simplicity, we're looking for what I call slow, but not slow in the sense of let's just stop, but slow living, conscious living, a slow city where we can actually feel safe and connect to what matters. I think slow consumptions, and in that process, it's connected to the slow city movement, the slow food movement. It really goes back to what you just said. Our mums and dads and their mums and dads lived a much more, what I call a life that was much more connected to their communities and place, where we've probably gone to an extreme, with that virtual world, and everything's getting better and better, worse and worse, faster and faster. So I think it's the faster and faster thing that's really said, okay, that's enough. COVID's given us a major pause, and it's given the planet a pause. And now we can say, okay, what do we want to go back to in that pause? We've created a bubble of oxygen to fill up again. What are we going to, in some ways, we're going to write our own script in this movie. That's a good way to say it. We're the script writers in this movie that's unfolding. What script do we want to write? And for me, I know that my script, exactly, and my script is going to be definitely one of a much more conscious world where I'm a player that I can help and be of service to unfold this new narrative of place, which is about, putting people and planet first.
Yeah. Look, I think the word for me in everything that you've just said that really jumps out is sustainable. And I don't necessarily just mean sustainable when it comes to energy, of like when people think of, you know, the environment. It's sustainable all way, like sustainable as a human, sustainable of our own energy, sustainable of our own lifestyle, of, you know, financially sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable, so that we can have, and sustainable in habits too, so that we're not burning out and having you know, fatigue and all of those other things, which are overall decreasing our physical, our emotional, our mental, and our environmental well-being. So we need sustainable success all around in order to be able to have the best well-being model, both personally, environmentally, society, community, globally.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. And I think it has to be very holistic in what you said, sustaining on a much more integral and holistic level to everything, to our food systems, to a whole heap of you know, community level, to financial level, to wellness level, all the things that you've just spoken about. And
Yeah.
and what's been interesting, Lisa, in the last 5 years, we've seen that the word sustainable want to morph into a new word, which is regenerative.
Yes.
Which is interesting. And I think regenerative is a word, is it's also at the mothership of the word sustainability, because in the word sustain, we're trying to sustain things.
Yes.
Regenerative embraces
yeah.
sustain, but we want with regenerative, we want to put back more than we take out.
Yes.
So in terms of regenerative design and regenerative agriculture, regenerative communities.
So let's talk a bit more about that regenerative lifestyle as maybe the part at the beginning of the new story. So, you know, what you just mentioned, putting back more than we take out. So let's talk about that a little bit.
That's right. And I think it's good to name the old story. You know, the old story has been pretty good for us. It's given us a lot of choice. It's given a lot of a lifestyle that we've all embraced, and, you know, we can do this. And I think what we're seeing now, that old story, as much as it's given us a lot of great things, and we have to give great thanks to that, is that it's based on an extractive model. You know that the earth is so plentiful. It's like it's abundant. We can just keep taking out as much as we want. So at the end of the day, that's not the case, and we've seen that with climate change. So I think the news story, as we birthed out of our little cocoon, the caterpillar wants to birth into this extraordinary new butterfly, which is the regenerative story, I call it. And at its essence, regenerative is a concept that at its essence is about how do we put back more than we take out? How do we, from a design concept, design cities that will create more food, bring back the birds, you know, make safer places, create a sense of well-being, create great public spaces that people can meet and connect and celebrate, and create new livelihoods, and, you know, create new regenerative energy of renewables, and start to recreate a story that we can have a level of energy security as well as food security. Regenerative agriculture replenishes our topsoils and regrows our forests that we've reduced. So all of these things are very new industries, I think, that will unfold. And regenerative in its essence is not just about a project. If you've got a regenerative project, if I had a building, it's about the region, it's about the city, it's about the streets. If I'm a developer and I'm going to build a new building, I'm going to also make the town stronger, the city better. I'm going to add a piazza back to the city. It's those sort of things that that really, from my point of view, creates a level of active hope for the future, and that we can use our 21st century technologies and build the hardware and the software together to build these new ways of being and living, and new technologies and tools. So it's very exciting. And even in my area, I use regenerative systems and development, and we have more enlightened developers who are embracing these tools, and they understand that a whole new market millennials are wanting a very new experience in the way they live, much more, as you say, sustainable but regenerative, that they can participate in their community, not just being a buyer, but an active citizen, and to participate in the co-design of their places, which is really exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. And I mean, it just, from what I can hear from what you've just shared, it's very much the ripple effect that has. So it's not just looking at it at this narrow point of view of just good for the, create stuff which provides energy or provides food. It's actually the ripple effect of what that creates around bringing people in, or creating, connection between people and extra jobs and, all these other things that it actually has a positive impact on. So, yeah, I think it's to be looking at these sort of opportunities in a very open mindset and growth mindset, because it is exciting of the ripple effects that those little projects can actually span out to. So, yeah,
absolutely. And I'll give you an example of, it's one project that's taking this up, and it's a large, almost acre rooftop in Melbourne. It's been quite extraordinary, and we're working with Indigenous elders and Indigenous designers, and we'll have obviously, we'll make our own energy with solar panels and wind turbines, as well as have Indigenous biophilia in terms of edible plants, and we'll use air, fire, water to create ritual. We'll have wellness pods and spaces, and this will be for everyone. Everyone's access, because it's an inclusive place. We'll have talks about the future of the world, and this place gets 20 million people in a year. It's extraordinary. So these are the things that can, it takes one developer to change, or a person with enough vision to change the world. And, it could shift the masses, just one project. People could get a taste test of what it would be like to live with low impact, but also connect to our Indigenous stories and grow food and make energy, and, see a retailer community, a conscious retailing community. And also this will have a zero waste, first retail zero waste, zero loop framework, where all the waste will be kept on site, all the food waste and everything. So these are exciting. Absolutely. As I said, we're putting back. The loop is actually putting back, and that's the future.
That is so exciting. And so was this something like a project that had already legs and was already starting prior to the COVID-19 times? Or is this something is this a creative solution and that's come out of these times where people have really been thinking about this regenerative story?
Well, actually, this project was pre-COVID, but because it's absolutely perfect timing for the COVID period to create these places of meaning and connection and also inspiration, the developers put it into fifth gear. Very smart. So in that sense, when we start to come out again into our, and we're going to be very wary once we start to go.
They planned that well, didn't they? They planned all that.
Perfect. I mean, but that takes an enlightened group of people who are looking at, 10, 20 years ahead and say, what are people, put it this way, they looked at economic exchange, the social exchange, the cultural and learning exchange, and the ecological exchange, but it also put the sixth pillar, which is the spiritual exchange,
with the ritual,
which is quite extraordinary. So when you've got all those working together and creating our cities and our environments to work, live and play and learn, then the whole human comes into being. You want to come to those places.
Right.
So, you really want to go to work when you've got these environments. You don't want to stay home.
Yeah.
There's a reason to come to work and get out of your house, because you're going to connect to something bigger than yourself, and you're going to learn, you're going to become a better human.
Yeah.
So, it's not just a job anymore. It's, you come to
true holistic hub there.
Absolutely. So that's exciting. And I think that's just one taste of the future to come.
Yeah, brilliant. And with a project like that, I assume that you're doing that with a private company, like private developers?
Yeah, these are private developers
And
who
how much
can
is the
see.
government getting on board with stuff like that?
Yeah, well, look, definitely it takes. Well, you know, it's as I said before. There's a when you journey with people and they've got a deep set of values. They were already on the journey. We didn't have to convince them about the
Mm,
values equation of this, around why it's important. It was about how do we do it? You know,
mm,
how do we make it happen? You
mm,
know, that's the exciting piece of our work and the implementation of that. So unfortunately, that's not the majority of people who create towns and cities and etc. But the smart developers and the smart money are really moving into these areas and really getting the benefit of what I call the next citizen consumer, a more conscious consumer unfolding, which is, I think, very exciting.
Oh, super exciting. So if we continue and look at these, other pillars of the new story, so what else have you seen? What else is, like even when we look at, say, the obvious part with COVID has changed, are those meeting common places, the physical spaces. How do we reclaim and reconnect those spaces, with the fact that, I mean, look, hopefully the social distancing and stuff isn't going to last forever, but it is a very different, even with all the hygiene and with all those things aren't changing in a hurry. Like we may
No,
be able to come
no.
together and gather in more and more numbers over time, but I think people are now have got different mindsets about in the way that they interact with others. And so how do
Absolutely.
we reclaim these common
Absolutely.
spaces?
Absolutely. And I think another pillar or theme that I've seen emerging out of this COVID period, and it's been happening for a while, but it really is the return to the commons. And what I mean by that is return to our public spaces in a way that's much more connected and meaningful. And look, things won't change until we get a vaccine and, we're all super safe. But I can tell you now, people are rethinking about what it means to connect and what it means to we're at its essence, humans are social animals. In our primal brain, a big chunk of our brain is built to connect and built to search for meaning and connection. So as a placemaker, what we're seeing is once we get through this period where we have to create safe places with physical distancing and hygiene environments, we're going to start to see people wanting to return to environments that not only where they can have an economic exchange, or it could be retail or consumption, but also a meaningful exchange around culture and learning. And as our parks and libraries open up, these are places that really are places for mental wellness. Italians always knew that, the more festivals that you would create, the healthier you would have, as people, healthier community you would have, because it's around, social and mental wellness, people breaking bread together, celebrating. So what we're starting to see is slowly, as restrictions start to slow down and we start to move towards a vaccine, people will really start to move back to their, first and foremost, their local places, their little piazzas and streets and town centres, and supporting local. And then what we'll start to see is the increased importance of public spaces. You'll start to see developers building little mini pocket parks and piazzas, and public seating and public events and rituals. And what we've underestimated, the importance of our arts sector to our arts give us meaning. Dance, music, I'm busting to go for a dance with my mob, and I'm sure you are too. It's like our food. You can only do so much on the internet on your own in front of a TV, but because we when we bounce off other humans, we're being nourished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our souls are being nourished. It's like food, soul food, and we get inspired by that. We don't even have to talk to people.
Yeah.
And but it's so I think that'll be an extraordinary evolution of the commons. We'll become commoners. And what I mean by that is that you have virtual commons, which is like Wikipedia, the internet, and what's happening here, accessing that, a global community. And then we have the physical commons, which I spoke about, all our public spaces, which is going to become increasingly more important, and how we govern that. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, Lisa, is that people are going to come out and wanting to participate more in their local democracy, in their local place. They want to make sure their place is not only safe, but beautiful, meaningful. They, it has a sense of diversity and livelihood. They want also, people are becoming more aware of looking after the most vulnerable, the homeless people on the streets, or our, single mothers.
We've even seen that in this time represented beautifully. Like even in my street, we've got a Facebook group just for my street. Granted, it's not a main road; it's a fairly small street, but we've got a Facebook group going so that we can, when there was a time right in the beginning, if anybody needed shopping, or if anybody was short of toilet paper, or like things like that. And now that's just continued on to, I'm getting rid of this in my house. Does anybody else want it? Like, there was a neighbour down the road who said, "Oh, my child's moving to a double bed. Does anyone in the streets child need a single bed?" And there's this exchange going on within the street. And then also there's in the wider area, like the suburb, there's some Facebook groups that have developed that are also about helping and caring for the elders in, the older people in the community, and different projects like that. We've seen the kindness pandemic that's come out online, like that group, and and then a lot of other community groups or religious groups or cultural groups that have formed together to help other people within their culture over this time. So I think that this has been really seen, one of the beautiful things and benefits of this time has seen a lot of people really coming together to try to help community and neighbours, and really do things a little bit differently that we've been detached from because we've been here, there and everywhere. So yeah, that's been amazing.
Spot on. It's like what's old is new. It's what we used to do.
That's right.
We used to know our neighbours. And I think what's exciting, what you just said, this is happening in thousands of places around Australia, millions of places around the world. And I think it's fantastic, and it won't disappear. We've got the same, we've got a little street with only 30 people here that went on a WhatsApp group, but we're connected forever. Yeah. And we've all decided, when we're allowed 50 people in a room, we'll have, a cup of tea at my place, and we'll have the local cultural historian to talk about this, the street and its history, and have a cuppa. But it's like, as you sort of alluded on, most important thing that we can have in this time is build connection and build trust. And that's where safety happens, because we know our neighbours. We can look out for the most vulnerable ones, and this is about, as you said, the kindness pandemic. We can become more caring. But this is also, I think, goes to the next pillar, Lisa, which is the pillar of hyper-localism that's emerging globally. And you can call it cosmopolitization of society, but cosmo-local or globalism, global and local. Yeah. You become a globalist because, on the internet we can go global with our colleagues and friends around the world. Anything gets passed. But at the end of the day, the earth needs us to understand our local places, our bioregions, and where our food comes from, and how we shop, how we connect to our neighbours and our public spaces. And what I think is exciting, and it'll be a bit of a transition as, the property market tweaks itself, where we'll probably lose a lot of people, and there's a lot of high rents, and rents will go down. And then what we'll start to see is some innovative young operators coming into our local streets, our communities. New concepts this happened back in the early 90s in Melbourne. People forget that there was a whole shift and change where Melbourne half the shops were empty because of cheap rent. People came back to the street. Our laneways came back to life. We created night markets, and it's going to be the same blooming of, I feel, of innovation and imagination around a local story. There's thousands of local stories in Australia, all centered around their local town or village hub or main street or cluster of small shops or the local park or the local community centre. It doesn't matter, but I think, I heard a fact with one of my colleagues a couple of years ago. I think it was she was one of those looked at research that all global manufacturing, more than half of global manufacturing will be local in 2050 or 2040. That's extraordinary. That is extraordinary. So that's because of obviously 3D printing. You could 3D print a house, just about anything now, but imagine that in 50 years' time, the technology. So suddenly we're living in a localist world and we can create our things that we want to create, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, super exciting. Can you just for a second, like just those last few sentences that you said, the connection went a little bit. So is your connection still good?
Can you hear now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It just sort of was like jotting in and out a little bit. So I was just double check that the...
No worries. I'll just repeat that last little bit, if you like.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. I heard it. And I think the listeners could pick it up. It's just that, just make sure going forward that we're a little bit more...
No worries. But look, what I did say is that the future will be local, and with 3D printing, a lot of global manufacturing will become local. And that's an exciting... Think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Any tool that you would need could be created on site, locally. You'll have thousands of 3D printers in your neighborhood. You could just WhatsApp and, Facebook. I need this. Yeah, I can bring you that tomorrow. It's a very different world. And also, Australians will be, they won't be going overseas in the next 6 months. That's for sure. Yeah. So we'll be getting to know our country in a very intimate way, loving our local. So locally loved will be the loving local, and creating lovable places will be a key theme in this environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I suppose even if we moved on to say one of the other areas, which is, we touched on slightly earlier in the conversation, that is a massive change, which also keeps us local, is the fact of, like you said, that all these home-based offices. So people working from home, like you said right in the beginning about that changing the idea with the work-life balance and all of that stuff, but it also then keeps people local and shopping locally and eating locally. And that's going to also have a huge impact on different areas, especially like what's our city going to look like during the weekdays with half empty buildings. I mean, it keeps
Absolutely
us local, but then what happens to the city? And do we, there's all these extremely incredible benefits of this local story, but what about, does it keep us in a bubble? When you look at even just, we're both in Melbourne. So when you look at Melbourne and you look at areas, different suburbs have very different, I suppose, socio-economic levels. So does it then decrease the diversity and keep people in their bubbles of, the more wealthy are sticking with the more wealthy, and the less, the people that are more poor, are they all sticking together? And is there not this hub of cross pollination, or not pollination, you know what I mean, as much? So I'm wondering, how does that come into the equation, and how do we, because that's not necessarily a positive, so how do we keep the diversity, keep us from our little bubbles? And what happens with those bubbles is often also confirmation bias and all of those things, because there's often similar political views in certain suburbs and all that sort of thing. So how do we keep our minds more diversified in this really local new world?
Great question, Lisa. I think I'll answer that in a couple of ways. One, and this is what I've seen in my experience as a placemaker. one of the things that we're going to be searching for in the future is authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we have in particular in Melbourne and Australia and lots of parts of the world is cultural authenticity. You know, that diversity of cultures in their food, their music, and everything else. I think what we're going to start to see as we start to go local, and definitely we don't want to stay in our little bubbles in our little suburbs, because, you know, that starts to create what I call the beige world. You know what I mean? We want to break out of that. And I think this is where people will start to search in, and we'll go to places like Dandenong in Little India and go on a Bollywood tour, you know, and we'll go to Broadmeadows or St. Albans and get the cheapest food and seen some of the most beautiful, you know, fantastic Turkish, you know, cuisines and then little Vietnam in Springvale and little Saigon and little Africa in Footscray. I think those places are going to be like, oh my God, this is like going into another country. You know, we have these little...
That makes me think the tourism, you know, like everyone's talking about the tourist, sorry to interrupt there, the tourist is, you know, tourism going down because people aren't traveling, but maybe that's the new creative solution for people in the tourism industry of creating these little stories within our own cities.
That's right. Our own city has a tourism story, which is extraordinary, which is exciting to sort of deep dive into. And and of course, we're going to go to beautiful places of our natural wonders and that are local and beautiful, and but also let's not forget our diverse cultural communities and the gifts that they can share with us of food, music, and culture. So I think that's going to be an interesting sort of evolution, and I think I, for one, and a lot of my friends will be visiting those places because we get a sense of aliveness. It's not beige, it's raw, it's gritty, it's safe, it's beautiful, it's tasty, it's yummy, it's inspiring. And also I think what's going to happen with our cities is what happened in Melbourne in the 80s. There's going to be a lot of empty buildings, but in empty buildings, rents go down, and we're going to have thousands of new opportunities like we saw in the late 80s and early 90s of young creatives going back into the city and community groups and maybe civic institutions, and then we start to have a much more, instead of a business city, we have a city that's got both hospitality, entertainment, but culture, the creative arts, but affordable spaces where new artists, musicians, and galleries can pop up, and it becomes a real rich, and that's what Melbourne was in the early 90s. You know, there was a rich layering of creative industries. So my sense is there's going to be an extraordinary journey of innovation and imagination in that. So it's happened before. We've seen Melbourne was a dead city, a lot of unemployment back in the 80s and early 90s, and then it sort of took its own evolution in its own hands. So I think this will be different again. Who knows what it's going to look like, but definitely there's a lot of creative people out there wanting to express, and there's a lot of what I call millennials who don't want to be just consumers anymore. They want to participate in their cities, and that's more of a citizen than just a consumer. So that's an extraordinary shift that we're about to see in the next 5 to 10 years.
I mean, this all just sounds incredibly exciting, and lots of different even just for the economic model, like lots of different opportunities for different jobs. I mean, it might not look the same as before, but it doesn't mean that there's, that the job market goes. It's just changing, what the job market looks like. But I'm wondering, for someone like yourself, like listening to this, it excites me. And I just think, oh my God, how much opportunity. There's so many different solutions. It's creative, it's innovative, and it's brilliant. But for someone like yourself who's actually on the ground doing this stuff, you're really open-minded, you're loving these opportunities, but how much of this is the ideal and how much of this is actually the real? Like, what conversations are you having? How many people are having these conversations? Are they just at a very small level, low level at the moment? are multiple communities or corporations having these conversations, and are they going to the government for these conversations as well? Like, can you inform what's going on at the moment?
Yeah, good question. Look, it's not to make this a whole romantic sort of narrative. I always say where there is vision, the people flourish. There are a lot of people having these conversations, and the smart ones who are going to thrive in this are having these conversations, Lisa. That's the thing. The ones who are sort of saying, oh my God, lock down, get rid of people, do this. And dare I say, there's a lot of, in this transition, there's going to be a lot of pain, there's going to be a lot of hurt, a lot of loss. And that's what happens when we're in a birthing. It's like we're the birth mothers and birth fathers of this new story. We're hospicing the old story, which is dying. And we're sort of birth mothering and birth fathering a new story, and it wants to be born. So a lot of developers, a lot of government officials that I've spoken to are having these conversations about what is the new local, what is the new economy, where do we create conditions for more innovation? When we lose tenants, where do we put, affordable rental? Where do we bring in the arts and culture into this? There's going to be, those who adapt and thrive, and then there's going to be those who don't adapt and don't change, and unfortunately they're going to die.
Yep.
So that's the brutal facts about transitions. And every transition we've had on the planet has been a painful process. They're not joyful in spaces to be in.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that we need to think about what do we want to create out of this. And we need to create something that is dynamic and flexible and resilient and regenerative. And we need the right developers, the right government. And I think this is where the fourth pillar I was going to talk about. We need business to be a force for good. Business is the largest, most influential institution on the planet, and it has lost its legitimacy. Well, big businesses lost its legitimacy, like banks, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to reclaim that legitimacy, especially with small business, SMEs. And I think SMEs do hold the country together, and they are, for me personally, the placemakers. They are the offers on the street. They can create innovations. They create culture, the great food, great arts, great fashion, great, bookshops, all of those things that we love and we take for granted as part of our daily rituals. So businesses can really come together and give back a little bit, especially the big businesses, and to inform and curate a much more a better story for the next citizen consumer. So ultimately, these neos, millennials, they got what I call good bullshit antennas.
Yes.
They're going to see through the crap, and they're going to say, well, actually, no, that's not real.
Yeah.
That's not authentic. So I think businesses are going to have an extraordinary role in this to unfold the new story.
Yeah. So it's kind of looking at it that we need more going forward in more conscious ways and a new type of leadership. So what I'm wondering, where if it all sounds brilliant, and say there are so many, in this city alone and definitely all over the world, there are so many amazing local artists, whether it be in fashion, whether it be in visual, whether it be in performance, that create these that can contribute to these new solutions. But often what I've also seen is a lot of people in that space aren't necessarily, they might be leaders in their specific areas, their skill sets might be brilliant at their craft, but they might not have the leadership in order to go, well, that's great that we've got this new model going forward that could combine this industry and this artist and this type to create this incredible connective, regenerative space. But they don't even know where to start, to how to get into those things, unless especially if they're emerging artists, which would be brilliant, because then you're really using local. Apart from there being, government grants when they decide they want to do a project, that they can then apply for, which they often don't apply for because it's such rigmarole to do that. How do you actually get this happening, and who takes leadership? Like, who are the leaders? Obviously, you're one of them, being, one of the incredible placemaking companies or businesses, small businesses locally. But like, if people are listening and they are one of these people and they want to get involved in this new solution, like, where do they even start?
What a great question. I think, and you talked about that question, what it is to be a leader in this time.
Yeah.
And we need good leaders. And I think, let me answer that for a moment, and then I'll answer the second part about where do we start. I do feel like we're all leaders in some ways, and you're a leader, and lots of your people that have been on your show are leaders. And what I think the new leadership needs is these core skills. We need to be first facilitators of positive change. We need to curate the positive stories, because there's enough spiritual vampires out there that'll take us down and they'll take us out. So we need to uplift people's possibility that they can change, and through positive change. So facilitation is a core skill. How do we facilitate good people to come together? How do we create new environments for people to come together? How do we create third places where people can meet and connect and network and make the 1 and 1 makes 3 sort of process? The other key thing I think out of leadership is to be a good enabler. We need to enable these environments to be given birth, or to create the spark, to initiate the new. So the third component is to be a good collaborator, which you mentioned, like earlier on, like how do we create collaborative environments that we can put our egos to the side and say, okay, this is in all of us, and there's going to be enough for all of us. And how do we support each other in this process? So that new to bring.
Gilbert, your connection's gone a bit funny again. Your connection just went a bit funny again. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry about that. It's don't start me on NBN. That's another topic. Okay, can you hear me now, Lisa?
Yeah.
All good?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's so important to create spaces for these good people, young entrepreneurs and innovators and the Imagineers to come together. Yes. And I think it's partly our role and my firm's role and hundreds of other consultants' role and governments to create these environments for people to come into collective creative groups and also governments to provide the possibility of seed funding for these innovators and entrepreneurs, social and creative entrepreneurs. So if I was a young entrepreneur, I'd be reading up on stuff, thinking about, trying to think out of the box, connecting and creating a tribe, a tribe of what I call allies. If they were listening now, I would be creating a tribe of allies. Who are my allies who can help me with some financial advice, some creative advice, who I can really share my ideas in a safe way? How can I find people who would create the openings of introductions for me? Yeah.
So all of these, like the networking, really.
It is networking. It's absolutely.
Yeah.
But network takes work.
Yeah.
And you've got to build trust, and you've got to be authentic. It's not about, and you've got to listen well, because networking can be the worst things, because someone's in front of you and you can see all they want to do. They're not even listening. They're just saying, what can I get out of this person? It's not about that.
It's connect.
It's almost like
connect working.
Connect working, exactly. It's almost like you have to gift yourself and walk away without any attachment.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're heading. And I think it sort of moves towards, that last pillar in a way, which I spoke, offline with you earlier on about the importance of culture, creativity, joy, imagination, that we really build, the environments for that to happen.
Yeah.
and this is around self-care and self-love and collective self-care that we bring in our families, our friends together to really have authentic and creative and courageous conversations. So, but we need to break bread together. We need to dance. Let's not forget, we're built to feel and to be fully human and to see, to be humans that have a sense of awe and wonder for the world.
Yeah.
So,
So basically, to have creative and collaborative possibilities through connection. And
correct.
The problem is that this idea that you just shared about breaking bread together and really having these courageous conversations, and I couldn't agree with you more. But in this time, I suppose we're just a little bit stunted in or blocked in being able to do that, with obviously the coronavirus or the COVID-19 restrictions. And so I suppose right now maybe it's that really good time to get creative and like reflect and innovate the ideas, so that when we get the opportunity to then come together or connect in ways, whether it be online, to start developing the tribe, to start bringing people together. And so then when we get the opportunity to be in the physical spaces together, there's already a conversation already started.
Absolutely. And I think, this too shall pass. It's not going to last.
Yeah.
So the rare moment we've got, when we're back, we might go back to business as usual, but we can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
We need to change within ourselves, and we need to change. We need to have our own, through journaling and visualization and building our allies online, have our own little roadmap of our story and of what we contribute back to the world. What's our gift? Because ultimately, the only thing that you can have is your essence, and understanding what that essence is and how you gift that to the world. And the world will respond, but you just got to stick at it. I've stuck at it for 30 years, and I had that dream 30 years ago. And the first, 15 years weren't that easy. 15, 20 years. It's only been the last 10 years that it's suddenly gone, okay, it's come together. That mastery of something takes a long time. And I think that's the thing. As long as you stick to your passion and following your bliss, and in your allies will come, your gifts will come, you'll be supported. There'll be rocks on, there'll be potholes, you fall in those potholes, you'll get up again. But we're having a privileged conversation at the moment because we've got a house, we've got a level of income and this and that, but not everyone's in that position. But even with a small amount, we can still dream. We can still imagine ourselves being something else or being better. We can build back better. We can do it better through this whole period. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Oh, it absolutely is. And, that is the thing. Like, that's something that I do share with my kids, and even, through the online school thing, and one of them liked it more than the other, but, the not being able to see the friends, and a lot of them didn't like, but I mean, they both didn't really like, but, having that conversation with them, in that they are making history. I mean, every day we're making history, but this is like a massive thing. Like you said, right in the beginning of the conversation, your 94-year-old mother, the big thing in her life was World War II. And so, the big thing in life now, like, is this pandemic. And they're going to look back, and they're going to have their grandchildren who are going to say to them, so what did you do at that time? What did you do to get through? And what changes happened? And what was that turn of the, the great turning or whatever, what was it? What actually happened? And, what came out of it?
That's exactly right. If you could just pause for a minute and just say, your 2030 self, the Lisa of 2030 would talk to the Lisa of 2020 and say, dear Lisa, and that 2030 self would talk to that 2020 self and say, dear ancestor, what was it like in this time? Lisa, this change with your children, what did you say to them? How did you step up? it must have been really hard. What did you do to make a difference? What risks did you take to make a difference now, Lisa? Go for it. Thank you for making a difference.
Yeah.
So it's an extraordinary time to be alive when you can think of your future self to your current self, and also your children's children.
And you want to be able to answer that, like, even what you talked about, even the beginning of this year, starting off with the fires and the big conversations around climate change, and and then the conversations with this pandemic, and then bringing it to the conversation of the Black Lives Matter, and it's like this massive year of all these huge conversations. And I suppose when you talk to that future self talking back to the current self, you want to be able to be proud of some of your choices, of what you did at that time when you do look back. And it is a very interesting perspective to do that. And I encourage anyone who's listening today to do that. Maybe write a letter, like, from your future self to your current self, and about that situation. And it's quite enlightening. And it's quite inspiring. It can inspire action.
Absolutely. I mean, where there is vision, the people will flourish, and you will flourish. So, we're in this moment together. We are better together in this moment. And I think, reaching out to those more vulnerable friends and groups and gifting, this is the gifting century that we're in. And, I'm excited to be having this conversation with you, Lisa, and I think hopefully your viewers will grab a few little, snippets of possibility. I always say, we pray for we plant the seed of possibility and pray for the rain of grace. We plant the seeds of possibility and pray for the rain of grace. So I think there's a lot of grace in this time that will allow these new possibilities to come forth. And we've just got to stay in it and keep watering, with grace, those possibilities, because I think, we'll come out as better people, and I have active hope, not just hope. There's no more, I don't have hope anymore, but I have active hope. And that's something that drives me personally, that I can activate my hope into action and into discussions and into courageous conversations. And I think we can all do that. If we can all go back through after this journal, 3 things that we could do, small things that what you could do, little actions that you could start to change tomorrow, and do that little exercise that you just said, future generations and current generations. That could be a moment of change for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Is there any other things, we've obviously been going for quite a while in this conversation. Is there anything which we didn't touch on that you really would like to be able to share on?
Oh, look, I think we covered a lot of turf.
I think so too. Yeah.
But I think, as I said before, we're better together, Lisa. I think that there's one word. I think, we're moving from that I to the we. And I think, this is the age of community. And even if it's virtual communities or physical communities, in families, stronger families and more conscious families, we're doing the healing together. And I think it's an extraordinary, transformative time to be alive. So thank you again for having me on your
brilliant
podcast.
It's just always such a pleasure and inspiration talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing so much of your wisdom and knowledge in this area. It's like, you are a front runner in this area, and if anybody is listening and they do want to get in touch and look and maybe hear if there's any opportunities for gathering, if you facilitate something or people that are facilitating group discussions on this, is there a way that they can get in touch with you, or any other platform that they can follow where there might be leads of ways that they can take action?
Yeah, so just if they keep in touch, even if they sign up to be informed on our website, villagewell.org, www.villagewell.org, and or you could email me, Gilbert at villagewell.org. No problem. Happy to support or give you a few books to read. And on the and I'm glad you've said that, on the 9th of July, this week was World Localization Week.
Okay.
So on the 9th of July, Michael Schumann, an extraordinary human being based in Washington, D.C., he's written about 5 books on, is a guru of localization, is a quirky economist attorney, Jewish economist attorney, great friend of mine. He's written about 5 amazing books, and both of us are doing a masterclass on the new local, going local in power. So that'll be a series. The first one will be free, and then we'll do 4 more after that. But that'll be on the 9th of July. So
Right. If you pass the details on to me after the show, I'll put them on the show notes. I'll put the
fantastic.
link.
Yeah, and that'll be exciting. And that starts to articulate in detail this the new local story of governance, of a new economics of place, of people coming together, case studies and practical tools and toolkits, and quite exciting. So we've been working on this for 6 months. So pre-COVID, and COVID obviously sped it up, and it's perfect timing. And hopefully it'll make a difference to many communities and individuals and the world.
Oh, brilliant. Amazing. I'll definitely tune into that. Will there be a recording as well?
Yes, there will be.
Oh,
we can pass that around.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for having this conversation and sharing where we're at and where we can possibly be going. So it's really exciting and inspiring. So if you have listened to the conversation today, I would love to know, well, we'd both probably love to know your biggest insight or takeaway from today's conversation. Just please leave a comment and let us know. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wellthy Living podcast on iTunes and on YouTube. To find out a bit more about my services, you can visit my website at wellthyliving.com.au or connect with me on any of my social media channels. So until next time, remember that connection is medicine.